I wanted to just take this opportunity to speak to everybody about how you can navigate a crisis and how we can move through this and not only survive it, but actually come out as better people as a result of it. And I know we can do that, but we need practices and we need strategies. And that's what I would like to focus on in this particular segment where I'm addressing you. And I want to be a voice of hope. I want to be a voice of inspiration. I want to be a voice of courage and to let each and every one of you know that no matter what you're going through right now, and we're all in this together, we're all in this crisis together, that no matter what you're going through, that you have the potential of coming out of it better. Not only the potential, but it is a probability that you will come out of this. Now listen to my words carefully. It is a probability, not 100% guaranteed, but it's a probability that you will come out of this better, more strong, more resilient, with new ideas and new opportunities. And that is going to be my focus on what I'm going to share with you. First of all, I'm here for you 100%. I want you to know and understand that people show up. This is when you know who your friends are, is when they show up when you really need them, during a crisis, during struggles, during hard times. And so it just felt so natural for me to come out and share my insights about how to navigate a crisis. Because you see, I've been here before. Now, not this particular crisis. I've never been in this one. None of us have ever been in this one. But I've had about 6 or 8 different crises in my life. And actually, all of us have been through some crisis before. And that's the first thing to acknowledge, is that, number one, it is a crisis. Let's not try and pretend it isn't. It's no more or no less. It's no larger than that, and it's no less than that. And that every life will have a number of crises in them. No life is without crises. None. It is impossible to have a life. Well, maybe if you're 15 years old, you perhaps haven't had a crisis. Usually, at least with me, the first crisis is when you lose your first girlfriend or boyfriend. And in hindsight, of course, it doesn't look like a crisis at all. But was it a crisis at the time? Of course it was a crisis at the time. And it's the same way. I had a major crisis when I was 18 years of age. I broke my neck. I was within a millimeter of being a quadriplegic. And I was 6 months in rehabilitation so that I had a neck fusion. And it was the most incredible crisis of my life. But I came out of it, and I came out of it stronger. And so that's the first thing to realize, is to not get overwhelmed by this crisis. And it's so easy to get overwhelmed because, of course, the mind goes crazy. It begins imagining the worst scenarios. Now, most of you that are watching this video right now, of course, you are Mind Power students, and you have done the Mind Power program, and you understand the basics of Mind Powers, and you understand the different techniques of Mind Powers. But often what happens in a crisis is we forget it. We get overwhelmed. And so the first thing that you want to do in a crisis is, number one, to acknowledge, yes, I'm in a crisis right now. And secondly, to get the fundamentals right. That's what this is going to be about, is getting the fundamentals right. And a crisis is a lot like being in a boat, in a sailboat. Now, those of you that know me know I love to sail and have had a sailboat for many years. I don't anymore, but I spent many, many years sailing. Now, when you're in a storm, what has to happen is you want to batten the hatches, you want to trim the sails, you want to prepare for the storm coming. And that's exactly what you do with a crisis, is that you acknowledge it and you take the necessary steps to overcome it. We've all heard of post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's something that can happen when you're in a very stressful time. And it is possible that as a result of this crisis, that you move into that. But why? Why would you? How about post-traumatic growth? Now that is a real phenomena. And what it is that from the trauma that you build resilience, you build creativity, you build courage, that you have new insights, that actually a crisis gives you an opportunity to reset and reboot your life. And that's what happens when your computer crashes. You have to reboot it again. So when your life is in a crisis, this is actually a tremendous opportunity for you to reevaluate everything and to eliminate those things that no longer serve you, and to embrace new practices, new ways of living. And I'm going to share with you some suggestions on how to do that. So the first thing is to acknowledge that, yes, I am in a crisis. The second thing to do is to acknowledge that I have been in a crisis before. And think about it. You know, usually we forget about the crises. I mean, crises are never enjoyable. They're traumatic. They're hard. They tax us to the limits. They draw upon all our resources. There's absolutely nothing pleasant about a crisis. But we do get through them. So if you're of a certain age, and you know, if you're at least 30, you've probably had at least one or two crises. If you're 50, you've had at least 3 or 4, and I'm in my 70s, I've had about 6 or 7 major crises. And what happens? You get through them. So that's the second thing that I want you to do, is I want you to remember that you have been here before. No, not this particular crisis, but a different crisis. And you did manage it. Now, at the time, you had no idea. I want you just to reflect back on previous crises. It might have been a health crisis, or it might have been a marriage breakup, or it might have been a bankruptcy, or any number of crises that you went through. And at the time, you had no idea how you were going to get through it. In fact, you thought it was hopeless. Be honest with me. You really did, didn't you? And why I'm sharing that with you is because when I went through my crises, even with my mind powers, I thought, how am I ever going to get out of this? But then I had to realign myself and remind myself that no, you always get out of crises. Always. And so what I would like to do is to change the narrative. Now, the mind is a storyteller. The mind likes to tell us stories. And your mind right now has a story about this crisis. And the story might be, I'm never going to get out of it. I don't know how. I'm in a mess. My finances are in a mess. I've lost my job, or I'm losing my job. I don't know how I'm going to pay the mortgage or rent. I don't know how I'm going to do that. And for many of us, that is the story that we have going through us. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to change, I call this, it's actually an advanced mind power technique. I'm sharing with you some advanced techniques. Why? Because they're called for right now. That's why. And an advanced mind power technique is taking control of the narrative. And how we take control of the narrative is that we observe what we're thinking right now. Now, am I thinking right now that I'm not going to survive this, that this is a disaster, that I don't know how I'm going to get out of it, that I'm never going to rebound from that? If that's the narrative, what you do is you notice it. You notice, okay, isn't that interesting how I'm thinking? And you change the narrative. This is the first thing that you want to do in your mind power practice, is you want to change the narrative. And you change the narrative by saying to yourself that this crisis is hard, it's difficult, it's taxing me to my limit, and no, I don't know how it's going to all work out, and no, I don't know how I'm going to rebound from it. But what I do know is that I will rebound from it. What I do know is that it will bring an opportunity to me. What I do know is that I will develop courage, resilience, creativity, that this will bring out the best in me. And that becomes your new narrative. And it becomes your new narrative because you tell it to yourself every morning when you wake up. The very first thing that you say to yourself when you wake up is, this crisis will make me a better person. I will not only survive this crisis, I will thrive. I will become a better person. I will become stronger. I will become more resilient. I will become more creative. I will develop new work habits. I will develop new mind power habits, that I will become a better person from this crisis. And when you fall off to sleep, you spend 5 minutes and you remind yourself once again that I am going to come out of this crisis a better person. And you spend 5 minutes telling yourself this story, creating the narrative. And what happens with taking control of the narrative, and you're getting an advanced mind power technique right now, is that what you're doing is you're taking control of what your mind is going to think. So if you do this every day in the morning for 5 minutes, and every day in the evening for 5 minutes, then what will happen is you will come and start to believe that you are going to come out of this better. And this is your strategy. You see, what you need during a crisis is that you need practicality. You need practices. You need strategies. You need things that will propel you into the new, more exciting life that will reveal itself. So, are there opportunities in this crisis? I mean, we know the disadvantages of it. I mean, they are quite obvious. I don't have to list the disadvantages. But what are the opportunities of a crisis? Well, the opportunities are that you get to re-examine your life in a new way, a new, more exciting way. You're not restricted. You get to look and evaluate, what is it that I thought was so important in my life? How was I living my life prior to this crisis in a way that was inappropriate? Maybe I was spending too much money in different ways. Maybe I was jollying too much. Maybe I had not been spending time with my family. Maybe I had neglected my spirituality. What changes can this crisis bring to me in my life? And to really re-examine your goals and to see, am I living my best self? How can I make myself a better person? And so that's what a crisis is an opportunity to look at your life and reset it and reevaluate what's important to you. Then another exercise that you do is an acknowledging. Now, you all know the acknowledging technique, and the acknowledging technique is to acknowledge yourself for successes that you've had in the past. But now, what I'd like you to do with the acknowledging technique is I would like you to acknowledge yourself that you have been in a crisis before and you survived it. Not only did you survive it, but you came out the better for it. And at the time, you had no idea how that was going to happen. I want you to remind yourself of that and acknowledge yourself that you have been here before. No, not exactly this crisis, but you have been in a crisis before and you survived it and you came out better for it. And you are a better person for it. Now, 5 years from now, this crisis will be long over, and you will be in a new position altogether. In fact, this crisis is probably going to be over in 6 months to a year. But let's project again ahead 5 years from now, where it's well in the distance. I want you to imagine you're your future self right now, and you're looking back at yourself and how you're reacting right now. Is your future self proud of how you're reacting? Is it pleased with how you're reacting? How could you make your future self really, really say, wow, you really got it right, didn't you? You really reacted appropriately. You did the things, you had the practices, you had the strategies. There's an old saying, never let a good crisis go to waste. Now, you don't want to look back 5 years from now and say to yourself, oh my God, I wasted that crisis. I let it defeat me. I was in action. I wasn't creative. I didn't make the changes. You don't want to say that. You want to look back at this time and say, wow, I really stepped up, didn't I? I really showed up. I really made the changes that I had to do. I really got my creativity working. I took on new skills. I took on new practices. And speaking of new practices, energetically, let's take on the practice of being in gratitude every day. Not thinking of all our problems and difficulties, but thinking of all the good things that we have to be thankful for. Let's take on the practice of kindness. Let's reach out to other people and help them in whatever way they can. Help them, encourage them. Let's take on the practice of being a better person. Let's take on the practice of doing our mind power every day. Let's take on the practice of being proactive. Let's be the person that we want ourselves to be, because that's what a crisis does. A crisis has the opportunity of going one of two ways, of either breaking you or making you a better person. And you are the one that will decide which way that's going to go. So change the narrative. Make the narrative, the new narrative, which you're going to do twice every day, is that I'm going to come out of this crisis well. I'm going to survive it. I'm going to be a better person. I'm going to be more creative, more resilient, stronger, and new opportunities are going to open up to me. I know that. That's what you project for. You acknowledge yourself that you have been here before and that you survived and came out all the better from past crises, and you will this one too, and you have a regular mind power practice. That you have these strategies, that you have these practices, and this is what you take into your life every day. And you take it one day at a time. One day at a time. And if you do that, you are going to come out of this in a tremendous, amazing way. You are going to be a better person. And you're going to be amazed at what opportunities come. In fact, I predict that if you follow these practices, you're going to look back 5 years from now, and you're going to say to yourself, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. Yes, post-traumatic growth is a psychological term, and that when people are dealing with a very stressful situation, what happens is that they notice that different people come out of it in different ways. And that true enough, some people come out of it and it breaks them and it is very stressful for them. But other people, it seems like a crisis is actually the best thing that happens to them. And that as we know that life demands change. And we forget that. We get too comfortable in our life and we think, oh, I don't want, especially when everything's going well, we never make a change when everything's going well because we're comfortable with it. But when a crisis comes, it forces you to make changes because you just can't allow the crisis to overcome you. And very often, when you make those changes, they are the exact changes that you needed to make to grow in your life, to become a better person, a smarter person, a more successful person. And on a microcosm, each one of us needs to make changes in our life. I mean, change only happens by choice, chance, or crises. And hey, we've got a crisis. So don't let it go to waste. See, what is this calling me to do? And from an individual point of view, that's the advantage. But I want to even speak right now from a macro view, from a humanity point of view, this crisis is an opportunity too. It's an opportunity for us as a species to say, are we really living our best selves? How can we as a community, how can we as a population have different priorities? And I think the number one priority that any of us can ever have is to be our best selves. I mean, forget about how much money I can make or how many cars I can have or whether I live in a mansion or how successful I can make my business. Now, I'm not negating these things. These things can be important to you, and but have we focused on what would make me a better person? What would make me kinder? What would make me more compassionate? What would make me more loving? How can I give back to my community? Maybe we've forgotten those things. And if we've forgotten them, then what a great opportunity for a crisis to make us re-examine them. So a crisis forces change, and change is almost always good, even if we resist it. Listening is a skill. And the first thing to acknowledge about listening is that you have no preferences for what you're going to hear. A lot of times we listen with an agenda. We listen for answers on how am I going to get out of this situation? What steps do I need to make? How can I be proactive? What can I do to make myself better? And those things will come. But first of all is to be willing to hear what wants to be said. And in order to do that, you have to take the time. And you can't expect it to come overnight, although it may. You want to give it days, you want to give it weeks, and even months if that's what it takes. Now, our natural inclination is to try and know and understand everything immediately. I know when we're going through a crisis, it's always, how am I going to get out of this? How about if we relax into, I'm comfortable with not knowing how I'm going to get out of it. All I have to know is I will. That's all. All I have to know is have faith and confidence that I will get out of it. Now, how can you have that faith and confidence that you'll get out of it when you don't know if you'll get out of it? Well, your faith and confidence comes from a couple things. It comes from, number one, what happened in previous crises. Did you get out of it? Yes, you did. Has there been any crisis in your past that you didn't overcome? No, you've got out of all of them. So why would this one be any different? Of course you're going to come out of this one. So you have the faith and confidence that you will come out of this crisis. Secondly, you have faith and confidence because you have the mind power system. And thoughts are real forces. And we are connected to the energy web of all reality. And so our thoughts, our beliefs, create our reality. And so we know that if we take on our mind power habits and practices, and for many of us, we've let them fall, and paradoxically, during a crisis is often when we don't do them because we're so overwhelmed with our own negativity. Well, perfect opportunity to restart them again. And so we by our belief, because a belief is a vibration of energy. And that's why I shared that when you control the narrative, and by the way, that is a mind power technique. Here's a new mind power technique, everybody. Control the narrative. And what is the narrative? The narrative is that I will come out of this crisis better, that I will be stronger, more resilient, more creative, and that opportunities will reveal themselves to me. So that's the new narrative. And as we tell it to ourselves over and over, we start to believe it. And as we believe it, it goes right into the subconscious. And then suddenly our subconscious is our partner in success. And the insights, the answers, the solutions, the things that we need to do will be revealed to us. So in listening, we listen with curiosity, with expectation, but we don't force it. We let it come in tiny little pieces. And things will be revealed to us, not the whole picture, but things will be revealed to us bit by bit. And as we make the changes, maybe when we listen, we went, you know what? I really can be a better person. And, well, if you can, start now. Start immediately being a better person in however that looks to you. Or maybe I should take advantage of this time off. I've been complaining that I'm working too hard. I've been complaining about all the stress that I'm under. Well, hey, maybe this is an opportunity to have fun. In fact, I want to really reiterate that. Bring fun into your life. Fun is an energetic. This is an opportunity to have fun. But John, how can I have fun when I'm in a crisis? No, you're called to have fun. It's a practice. Have fun every day. Be in gratitude. And so the listening is just being willing to hear what is being said to you and to believe that you will be led in the right way to do the right things at the right time. And you will come out of this crisis. And 5 years from now, here's my prediction. It's Kehoe. It's like Nostradamus. It's a Kehoe. Here's my prediction. My prediction is if you follow these practices and this strategy exactly as I'm outlining it, and you follow your mind power program, my prediction is you're going to look back 5 years from now and you're going to say, this was the greatest opportunity and gift that I've ever received. In life, you create priorities, what's most important to you. And number one on my list of priorities is to have a fun and interesting life. It has always been number one, and it's been my compass. And I've followed what's fun and interesting, and it's made me an extraordinary life. And so a concept that I'd like to introduce right now is to think of yourself as being an artist in your life, and that you get to create your life in a very creative way. It's very interesting. They've done studies in creativity, and they noticed that if you ask a 5 or 6 year old, how many of you go to a classroom and maybe there's 30 or 40 of them in the classroom, and you say, how many of you think of yourself as being creative? Over 90% of 5 and 6 year olds will say, yes, I think I'm creative. And then psychologists have done a study of people in their 20s, and they say, how many of you think you're creative? And less than 5% of people in their 20s think they're creative. Well, what's happened there? What's happened between 5 and the 20s that has made us think that we're not creative? Well, what's happened is that we have the wrong definition of creative. We think that being creative is being a writer or a painter or a sculptor or a playwright, or those people are creative, but I'm not creative. I'm just an average person. Well, listen, first of all, if you've raised children, you're creative because you can't successfully raise children without being creative. If you have a successful business, you've been creative. In navigating life, we are an artist in our life. And so realize, and all the more in crises, is that you gotta be creative. And so the challenge and the opportunity during this particular crisis is, how can I make myself a fun and interesting life during this crisis? And you say, fun and interesting, John, it's a crisis. What are you talking about, fun and interesting? Well, are you an artist or aren't you? And start thinking of yourself as being an artist in your life. And if you're an artist in your life, then you can create whatever life you want. And you can make this a fun and interesting time. And so what balance feels right to you? Forget about trying to navigate it with constant action. And by the way, action is important, but ideas are important. Fun is important. Nourishing yourself is important. So if this is an opportunity for you to bring fun and creativity in your life, then you should welcome that. Ask yourself, what was my life like before the crisis? Was I having a lot of fun? And was it fun? Was it interesting? Was I taking time off? Was I meditating? Was I going within? Was I doing the things that are really important to me? And if not, then bring balance back in. Or for others, it might be, no, this is my time to really get my act together. I've been slacking and I need to do more work. Only you will know that. But balance is important. And that's where listening comes back in. Listen within. Notice what feels right. Trust what feels right. You will be led to do the right thing at the right time. It's our social responsibility to be our best selves, to think positive, to have a narrative that sees us, and not only sees us, but sees the world coming out as a better place as a result of this. And it's our social responsibility, and this is maybe a very good place to really emphasize, is that coming out of this, not only whole, but coming out of it as a better person, is our social responsibility. It's like an analogy that I shared with a person quite recently, is that when you're in an airplane and something happens and there's an incident in the plane and the air masks come down, and of course we've all seen, the announcements as what do? You put the mask on yourself first before you put it on your children, because you have to be able to breathe and operate and function in order to help your children. And the exact same analogy applies to this present crisis is those of us that are going to be global conscious citizens and be our best self. It's up to us to put, metaphorically, the mask on ourselves first. It's up to us to have the courage. It's up to us to have the vision. It's up to us to have the resilience and the strength and the imagination and the creativity and all the qualities that are called for, not just in our own personal life, but for us as a society to change this world. It starts with us. We are the ones where it starts. And we are called at this time to be our best selves, not just for ourselves, but for all of us.